Hello, listeners. Kathy Lawless, Life Story Curator, bringing you this podcast series, How Did I Get Here? A series of interviews designed for people just starting out in their careers, people in transition, or possibly feeling stuck. Giving them access to the stories of people who have been there, done that, so that they might be inspired with some new ideas, or maybe just comforted knowing they are not alone, that everyone starts somewhere and everyone goes through times of transition and feeling stuck. Today, I'm very excited to be interviewing Kelley Colvin, who I've played volleyball, I guess not with as much as against, for many years now. So welcome, Kelley.
Thank you, Kathy.
And Kelley is a research instructor at the Anschutz Medical Campus. And it was through or over, I guess, maybe a beer at the facility we play volleyball at that I was learning about her business, and it's just fascinating. So, Kelley, I'm excited to get into what you do. But before we do that, I like to go into the icebreaker questions so that listeners understand where you grew up, how many siblings you have, where you are in the birth order, and how all that kind of influenced who you are today.
Sure. So where I grew up was in Aurora, Colorado, just locally. I was actually born in California, but when I was 2 or 3, we moved to Colorado. My dad worked for Lockheed Space and Missiles at the time, so he was transferred.
Oh,
yes.
Was he a rocket scientist?
Basically, yes.
Well, that's a cool occupation for your dad to have.
Yeah. So my sister said he was a spy with satellites, and I said, "Why are you telling people he's a spy?" That's supposed to be secret, but anyway. So, like I said just now, I had one sister who was younger, and then I had 2 older brothers.
So 4 of you.
Yes. So I'm third, but my mom actually went through 5 births, and she lost one child when it only lived 4 days, which was actually good for everyone all around because it was not very viable. So
yeah. Wow. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So let's see. Having 2 older brothers, I had one brother who was 7 years older than me and one brother who was 2 years older than me. And how did that influence me? Well, the one who was 7 years older than me, I don't really have much contact with. He lives in France, but he did some not so nice things to me. So that has influenced my life. I choose not to play the victim here, but I've learned a lot from who I am and what I am and where I'm going and how strong I can be. So actually, I don't want to say things happen for reasons or blessing in disguise or anything like that, because if I could change it, I would. But it is what it is. And then, and then so my younger sister, very much gave me she was just a year younger, a motherly instinct, because my mom was busy with all the kids and she was a homemaker. So that's really kind of shaped my personality there.
Yeah. So almost because you're the first girl and having a younger sister, then you were almost like a firstborn. Well, almost an oldest, sort of.
Yes.
When you look at some of the patterns and stuff. Yeah.
Yes. And then my brother, who was 2 years older than me, was very, very athletic. And so that played a huge role when I was little, I actually wanted to be a boy, not knowing what being a boy meant. I wanted to play all the sports that he's played, and I did. And I played with all his friends and competed with him. And since he was very good at what he did, I became really good too. But part of that is genetics, right? Because you aren't just born with coordination, and so I could really play any ball sport there was.
Yeah. That explains your volleyball skills too. I get that.
Yes.
Totally get that. Well, cool. And then any musical instruments?
Just the recorder. Do you know what that is?
Well, yeah, it's like a clarinet or a flutophone or something.
Yeah, it's not really even close. It's just this plastic little, sort of fluty thing. Yeah. But no, not really.
No, not really.
Yeah.
Okay. So a different type question on if you look at a fun meter on a scale of 1 to 5, would you say what rating would you give yourself? 1 being couch potato and 5 being life of the party.
Um, Depends a lot if I've had a cocktail or not.
Oh, okay.
No, I changed that a long time ago. I felt like I could just have fun drinks or not. So, I'm not sure. Are you saying, is this rating by myself or what other people think of me?
It could be both. You could give us a rating from each, yourself and what you think others think.
Well, it just is respective to the environment and time. I guess at times I can be a 5, and at times I can probably be a 1.
Okay, so depends on the situation and maybe the people you're around. And
It does, but if I get it in my head, I'm going to have a fun time. I am a fun time. So
awesome. I like that. Mindset is everything.
yeah, it's all a state of mind.
Okay, well, on a different meter, we'll call this the risk-taking meter. Same scale though, 1 to 5, 1 being low, 5 being high risk. Where would you put yourself?
That's also respective to what the situation is, because right now, I live with my 85-year-old dad, and it's just the two of us. And so risk taking with this COVID virus that's out there, I wear the mask and I do my due diligence to wipe my hands all the time with a Lysol wipe, or wash my hands and, keep my distance from people, because I have a different view on actually, how bad the virus is. But because it's not just me and him, I don't take a very large risk. But on certain things, I do. Like, I will speak up, and, if my job's on the line, I'm going to speak up, and that's a risk, especially in the environment where I work. And jumping out of an airplane, sure, I would do it, with a parachute on, of course, but
of course, and the proper training.
and the proper training. Or if I'm hooked to somebody who knows what they're doing, I'll take that risk too. So
you'll take that. Well, that's awesome. One of the last gentlemen that I interviewed, he said he was a 6. And he's like, I'm all in. And I'm like, well, personal and professional. And he's like, absolutely, I'm all in. I'm a 6 for both.
Wow.
And then other people I interview are like, well, I'm a 5 or a 4 and a 5 for my professional, but personally, I'm not an adrenaline junkie or anything. I wouldn't jump out of a plane. And they'll even use that example. So anyway, so I love that. See, this is what gives us such a great perspective on people is where do you stand on that? So great.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Well, Kelley, why don't we move now into what you're doing today? So tell us a bit about that, and then we'll get into how did I get here?
Okay. So I run a research lab. Mostly vascular lung biology is our expertise. But I got into that a while ago, specialty being pulmonary hypertension. Most people think they know what pulmonary hypertension is, and I did not know what that was when I started. I was thinking regular hypertension, where that's systemic, and that's basically throughout your body. But pulmonary hypertension is specific to your heart and lungs. And then recently, in the last few years, that has sort of turned over into studying Down syndrome as well. My business partner has a sister that has Down syndrome. So we went after some money with Down syndrome, and quite a few of them are born with pulmonary hypertension as well. And that's, you can get pulmonary hypertension from many, many things. So, and it can be secondary to something. And as far as Down syndrome goes, they are born a lot of the time with a congenital heart defect. And so that can cause pulmonary hypertension as well. But a while ago, when I started I came from National Jewish, but I started with my boss, who was he was in cardiology, MD in cardiology, and now he's chief of cardiology. And his specificity, I guess you would say, was to study pulmonary hypertension. So yeah, but that's what our research lab is. So it's Down syndrome and it's pulmonary hypertension, I guess, if you want to just give it a basic label.
Basic label. Wow. Well, I know when we were first chatting before the interview, I had asked about, with all this COVID stuff, are you all doing research then, how does that work? And you had said, well, that's not necessarily exactly what you're doing right now, but can you speak to that, since the timing of it is so
sure
fast?
Sure. So our direction that we have taken with people with Down syndrome is they tend to get respiratory disease, whether it be from pneumonia or other types of infections. And they typically have what's called a recurrent respiratory issue. And we have discovered through some other research is that these illnesses that they have recurrently, and even people who do not have Down syndrome, so you want to call them atypical, you don't necessarily want to say they're normal, but they're a typical person like you or I. If we had a recurrent respiratory issue when we were younger, and a lot of people have done research on this, is that your cognitive abilities are very much affected by that. So what in having Down syndrome plays a role, like if they're having these recurrent, because of their genes, these respiratory issues, that their immune system is suppressed, are they walking around like they have flu already? So that's the basic direction of that study. But we're studying, we have a mouse model that mimics Down syndrome. So we're infecting these mice with pneumonia and influenza, which is your question. How does that relate to COVID? Well, in our larger group, it's the Linda Siernick Institute for Down syndrome. We have a researcher there who believes that Down syndrome, so for people who don't know what Down syndrome is those are people that have an extra chromosome 21. So you usually have a pair of chromosomes for each one. And number 21, there's an extra chromosome there. So you have 3. So obviously these chromosomes have genes on them. And so your body is, you would think, would be producing for each gene more of what is there, all the proteins that it produces. So, but that's not necessarily true, because your body takes care of what, there's an upregulation, a suppression, a downregulation of, if you have actually a triplication of a gene, you don't necessarily make more of it, because all the other mechanisms in your body takes care of it, and that may suppress it. But typically you are seeing extra, and that's why you have the phenotype that you do with Down syndrome. But the other group studies interferons. And if you don't know what interferons are, they're part of the cytokine group. So cytokines are produced from immune cells. So they are spit out from the cell, and they cell signal to other cells. And it's all part of your immune makeup. And interferons are on chromosome, the major ones that this person is studying are on chromosome number 21. And so he thinks because you have more genes there, you're having what's called an interferonopathy. So it's a dysregulation of your interferons, which play a huge immune response. And that's when you get an infection in your lungs. Obviously, you're having an immune response. And since the COVID-19 is specifically targeting lung cells and is giving huge damage, he has decided to throw some of his studies where the interferons signal some genes. It's called JAK and STAT, and it's kind of downstream from the interferon signal. And if you can, and the stats are also being increased and making your body do weird and wild things. Well, if you can block these things from your having such a huge overload immune response, that maybe you can help with tempering that reaction that you're having. Does that make sense?
Wow. Well, that's way more than I knew before we started the conversation.
Well, and interestingly enough, is another group at the university is I forget her name. I don't know if it matters, but she is studying interleukin, which is another cytokine, IL-6, and IL is short for interleukin, IL-6. Well, they have discovered, and so this is why it's good. All this research is out there, and it's so unknown right now, but so much is being studied and learned in a quick manner because everyone has shifted towards studying this, because obviously we need to find a cure or find a vaccine for it. But right now we just want to know what the characteristics are of it. But people who have an increased level of IL-6, which are men and older people and the African American population. So you see this in the news that, okay, they're doing worse off than we are, being, general, I guess, Caucasian population. And why is that? Well, their IL-6 is elevated. And so, but why is that? So we don't know why, but they're figuring out what are these characteristics that we can put two and two together. And so everybody needs to communicate with each other and start figuring these things out, because I don't know if you know this, but the research community has become very segregated in the last, 20 years, because getting money, writing grant proposals and actually getting money 20 years ago, you would write a grant, submit it, and about 21 to 25%, even 30% of people would get the funding. Now it's about 8 to 12%.
Oh, so you really don't know if you have funding.
So it's very difficult to get that funding. So you're competing with more people now that are in research, and they're giving less money. So
yeah. Well, and then once you get the funding, you need to use it for what you said you were going to. Yeah. So it's not like you can just switch gears because there's a pandemic, right, and now you just decide, well, now I'm going to go research that. You need to finish what you started. And then that's why other people then would stop. Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. That's very interesting and very technical as well. But
I was trying to.
It did. No, you explained it very well. I know that it's way, more complicated even than what you shared with us. But what I got out of that was that, there's these different markers in different areas of specialty, and, research is so, it has to be so specific, and once you start going down this path, you need to finish the path. Yes. Like your focus is on the Down syndrome, the impact of the lungs, whereas other people are going to have other studies that they've started.
Yes. So. And you have to get that. You're spot on with that. So the other guy in our group has requested and gotten emergency funding for because he has specifically with the immune system and these inhibitors that he would like to try in people, of inhibiting the over response of the immune system. So I don't know if that will actually be put into a trial, but he proposed it and he got money for it. And his mouse model that he's used is working along those lines. So good question.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's shift a little bit back to then, how did I get here? Which is, how did you get to be a research instructor at the Anschutz Medical Center? When you were a young girl, did you want to be in the medical profession, a doctor? I mean, was that your path, or did that happen later?
No, Kathy, I did not. I didn't think I was smart enough. So to be honest with
Oh,
you, so in elementary school, believe it or not, I really didn't know how to read. I was so shy, and I was so, um, just, it just pained me to have to even say anything to anybody. But my brother, who's 2 years older than me, I really honestly think he was dyslexic. So we had this open commons area of all the grades, and you would go off to a certain, but it was all open except for in the middle. There was a room that had glass walls to it, so it was just encased in glass. And uh, if you were falling behind, let's say, you were put into that room in the middle where everyone could see you.
oh
So
my
my brother
gosh.
was put in there. And so they just thought because he was like that, I was like that. But they started us on a spelling curriculum that lasted about 6 months, and then they stopped it because it was, I guess they deemed it uh, not helping the kids. And so I didn't know how to spell, for one. It took me, I still don't know how to spell very well, just the way I was taught. But reading wise, I was definitely afraid to even like read out loud in front of anybody either. And it just sort of took me a while to, and I remember not doctor, Mr. Schmidt. He was one of my teachers, and he was, if you were really smart, you would get in Mr. Coffee. I know his name's Mr. Coffee, but yeah, his class. And I don't know, accidentally or something like that, in 6th grade put me in Mr. Coffee's class. And then they thought, well, we got to move you to Mr. Schmidt's class. The kids are not as smart. And so I wrote this letter basically to myself, but I wrote it to Mr. Schmidt. Like, I can't remember exactly what it said. Like, I don't like you, or it was just dumb 6th grade stuff, you know? And I left it on the chair where I sat. Well, he happened to sit there. I thought, okay, maybe he'll get, like, I just never realized that he would actually get this note that I wrote. But he
Oh
found
no.
the note. But then, to his credit, he brought me over and he confronted me with it. And to this day, I can't remember exactly what he said, but it changed my tone around, and it changed my, thinking of myself, and it just changed a lot. And so when I got into 7th grade, I was fine. I could read, and it was just it was a turnaround of, but no, I did not think I was going to be an MD at all. I knew that through high school that I loved biology. I just loved nature. I loved biology, and I loved how things grew and worked. My mom was always a gardener, but I also was very into sports. So I cared more about the sports, which actually also helped me with my shyness, because I wouldn't say 2 words to you, but you got me on the softball field or the basketball court, volleyball court. I then could shine, and then people would notice me.
Mm,
And so,
mm-hmm.
and even like with boys, they noticed me. And little did I know, it's like they didn't want someone who could, beat them at the sport. But
Yeah, I was saying. They noticed you, they were impressed, and then wait a minute, he's better than I am.
yeah. And years later, they would all say, oh my gosh, and also because I had a big brother who also beat up everybody. But I also had a turning point in 7th grade where I was playing volleyball in just a gym class. And the gym teacher, she liked me because she also coached the volleyball. We didn't have all this club stuff. Well, it was just starting back then. And and I did join a club team, but I was on the younger team, and they were going to Huntsville, Alabama for a tournament. And they decided not to take the younger team, just the older team. Well, they took 2 people off the younger team, and they were the coach's daughters, that sort of thing. And then they kept our money, and my
yeah.
mom had to go get our money back for that. So that was that. I was done with that. So, but I remember her name too, Mrs. Porter, and she coached volleyball, so she knew me, and I was in her gym class, and we were playing volleyball for class, and we had probably like 15 people on each side. And so this very, very large African American girl came over onto our side, and she was very sort of queen bee. I'm taking over. I'm doing this. And so because I was shy, I'm not going to tell her to her face, get over on your back on your side. I tell Miss Porter. And so she knows that I told Mrs. Porter, and so she has to go back on her side. She starts calling me names. And I just stand there, and I don't know why I said anything, but I said I wouldn't talk if I was you, because she was saying something about my size. But she came and she confronted me about 6 inches away from my face, ended up saying some things to me, and then she threw me to the ground. And I had long hair back then too, and I just remember the slow motion hair flying over my face, and something clicked in my head, maybe snapped. And I thought, she cannot get away with this. So, you get it. No one gets in fights anymore, but this is just the honest to God's truth. I got up, and I don't remember what happened, but all the boys told me what happened is I wailed on her, and I was so like upset with, you cannot get away with this. I'm sticking up for myself now, and this and that. Well, lo and behold, she tore out a lot of my hair and whatnot, but went back to the classroom. Then we both the teacher said, well, I'm not going to report you because I'd have to report you both. So we go to class, and then we get called back down to the PE office, and I'm scared to death because right before I left that, the fight had ended, that girl says, I'll see you by the green box, which is the electrical box where all the fights happened.
Oh, which is
after
outside.
school. So I was scared out of my wits. So I go down to the PE office. Well, this gal, she was there, and she says, I'd like to apologize for what I did. And she shook my hand, and I went, oh my gosh, yeah, me too, that type of thing. But that incident, and then she thought she was my best friend from then on, all through high school and whatnot. I was still scared to death of her, but she respected me that I actually stood up to her. And, I figured you could get in a fight and physically hurt each other and then still be okay with somebody. And I learned a lot from that incident. Like, you can't hold somebody to, that's the way, maybe in that moment, there's somebody else. Their personality is somebody else. Maybe something's going on at home, something, whatever. That was a huge learning moment for me. So,
yeah. Well, in a way, you were kind of somebody else when you stood up to her, right? Because then when you got your wits about you, then you're like, oh crap, I'm gonna have to see her again, and then you were kind of back to your old self again. Wow. Well, great story, great learning experience, man. I'm sorry you had to go through that, but wow.
Yeah, to me, I'm like, powerful. I'm glad about these things where it just sort of, for me, my whole face scrunches, and I get this thing on the top of my head where it scrunches up, and it's this adrenaline, I guess. But you remember those things. So did I go off tangent, Kathy? So where
well, a little bit, but this is part of what you were talking about. Sounds like 7th grade had some real pivotal moments for you. One is that you realized that you could read and that you could be successful in school. And you also realized that you could stand up for yourself. Wow. Those are are huge
and
things.
I also had a friend, it was strange because it was a learning moment for me too, he was this kid, and he was always nice to me. And I would say hi back to him, and he was overweight. And this is funny because I always thought that I was overweight. But when I look back at my pictures from high school, I was not overweight. Yes, I thought I was.
But you thought you were.
So he would always say hi to me. But then one day, and he pushed the milk cart. He sold the milk, and he did the cart in the commons. And then one day he wasn't there. And so then I see him, and he is skinnier than all get out. Well, he had been gone a time, and I didn't know what happened to him. And then he was there for a while again, and then he disappeared again, and then he never came back. Well, he died. He had anorexia, and he was a boy. So, and
Oh,
that
wow.
really deeply went to my heart, like to feel that way enough about yourself to treat yourself like that, and then not, and just give up. And I maybe he wasn't giving up, but to die from that, it's hit home. Like, what are you doing to your body? You know? So
Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah.
that was in high school. I did my thing, and I played my sports. I pretty much did. I have always only had a few friends, and that's been good enough for me. And you venture out at times to go and find other friends, and oh, how many friends can I have? It just doesn't matter to me. If I have a few very, very good friends, that's what is keeps me going.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's more meaningful. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I
So
get that.
okay.
Totally. So then, did you have a scholarship to college, or did your
Yes.
family have money for college, or
Okay.
how
So
did the college
college,
happen?
I played. I didn't know. I'm like, okay, I guess I'm going to CSU, or I guess I'm going. I thought maybe I'd play volleyball at. So I did play club softball. So I was pitcher, and so I still didn't. I was thought, okay, I'm gonna go to CSU, and just go there and maybe walk on to something or other. And in that June of that summer, I was in a softball tournament in Nebraska, and coach there saw me and said, "Do you want to come to Kearney?" It was Kearney State College at the time. Now it's the University of Nebraska at Kearney. And I thought, what the heck? He put me on the airplane that was about the size of a bus, and it would land in all these small towns. And we go up and down and up and down. Finally, I landed in Kearney, and their athletic director actually looked like he could be in GQ magazine. So he was showing me around.
Ooh.
I'm thinking, gosh, if all the guys in Nebraska look like you, so
Yes.
yeah,
Where do I
so I
sign?
signed on there. But let me tell you, that was a big kind of shocker. I was sort of a home girl, and my mom, she made every single lunch I had from kindergarten to 12th grade, and she took care of everything. And so to drive me out there, and I actually walked on to the volleyball team, which worked out in the end. But this Rosella Meyer was her name. I remember her, but she was the coach, and she didn't really give a fair tryout. I thought she was throwing the ball all over the court, like with one hand, not even doing the double hand toss of. And she had already had her team, and I think she made a deal with the softball coach because they didn't want people playing dual sports taking away. Neither her nor them. Maybe I just wasn't good enough in the tryout. I'm not sure, but it was a blessing in disguise. That one was, because softball took up a lot of time, and but it paid for my school, and my parents could have done it. They, at that time, my sister also had gotten into college, but she was wasted a couple of years, CSU and then UNC, and then she finally went to art school, which cost them, all in all, is about 60 grand. So I thought, I'm doing this for myself. It's like my job, and I felt good about that, you know. So, and my coach
Yeah.
there was a
Yeah.
super jerk, though. And he ended up like dating the center fielder, but we were national champions. So, and that was like Division II school. So that was a lot of learning experience being on that team. That guy was like, he had the Bobby Knight attitude. You're the team, and I'm the coach, and you go sit over there when we're, eating at McDonald's for our dinner when we're on road trips. And I'm over here, and I'm like elite from you, whatever. But we won the national
Mm.
championship because of we were a team together. Like it's we basically knew all what he would do and what he would call, and he would every other game, he would get mad at something and try to tear out third base and throw it and just have a temper tantrum. And, he had some strategy, but it was all the strategies that we had already learned. And most of these girls on that team were rejects from the University of Nebraska, who the year before had been, Division I champions. So, and we actually got to play them, and I got to pitch against them, which was also good. And we played against some in the fall. We played tournaments because it was spring ball, but fall that we'd have practice tournaments and whatnot, and get to play a lot of Division I teams. And so I got to pitch against some of them. We won some of those, and against Nebraska, we only lost 2-0. So we couldn't hit. We couldn't come close to their pitcher. but
well, they only came. They only had
and,
2 runs,
and they were not earned runs. So I was feeling pretty good about that. But and actually, I was not even our first string pitcher, I guess you would call it. So, an all learning experience, because from when I was 9 or 10 pitching, and my dad was sort of hard on he was kind and he was nice, but he would razz me of, we'd have 7 innings in softball. And if I struck out 20 out of the 21, he would say, what happened to that one?
Oh, geez,
but
focus on the one.
I may have taken him in a wrong way. He may have meant that jokingly, but I was very serious about it. So.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that's how I got to college. Then I'll tell you, Kathy, because I know you asked me this at the island. I was on my path. I wanted to do biology. I was a biology major. And then at one time I thought, do I really want to do this? What am I going to do? I don't know what to do. What? And I almost switched to recreation management because it was like sporty type stuff.
And you were so into sports.
But something in me, I've always, and I don't know what this is that's in me. Maybe it's genetic. Maybe it's just whatever it is. It's more rewarding, as what I think it is, as I always take the harder path. And at that time, I thought that was the harder path. And so I stuck with it. I got it. And so the next thing I went to is right when I graduated from Kearney, my parents moved to England. So because of my dad's job. So I moved there with them thinking I'm going to go to more school. But I went up to Leeds University. So they moved to Harrogate, which is in the North Yorkshire, middle upper England. And Leeds University, I went and visited thinking I'm going to go to more school. It was a huge, think about small town Nebraska culture shock, going to this old, dingy, hundreds of years old university, stone that is, how many years old, and just dingy from all the coal that they produced and being through the war and everything. It just was, it was just, and then,
big shock.
I graduated in. And that was also my decision. I was on the 5-year plan because of softball, but then I had met a guy, and then I was trying to finish early. So I finished a semester early for the guy. Well, that didn't turn out, which all these things, things sort of fail, but then other things come out of it that are good. And when I moved there, I thought, well, I can always go back to, because I was coming from Kearney, I could always move back to Omaha, where I had met a lot of friends that went to Kearney that were from Omaha. And another guy says, well, my dad will give you a summertime job until you can figure out what you want to do. Because I thought, I have this biology degree. What am I going to do? I don't know anything. That's what I felt. Like, what are the jobs? Yeah, what
jobs?
Do I know?
Right?
I don't know anything. That's what I felt. So I get back there, and lo and behold, this was like the Omaha Power Public Service type thing. It was like a reception or something like that. And turns out the guy just wanted to date me. There was no job. I said, I know. I said,
oh man, it was a trick.
No job, no date. So So I went to the
Way to put
University
your
of
foot down.
Nebraska Medical Center and looked for jobs there. And they had what's called research technician jobs. And I thought, okay, this guy, he was studying periodontal disease, anaerobic bacteria. I don't know if you know what anaerobic bacteria smells like, but it's not good. Well, it's,
I don't even know what it
people
is.
who have gum
Ew.
disease, and then we dealt with it in a glove box, where you're sitting with this plastic box where you're sticking your arms through there with rubber gloves. So yeah, because it has
Yeah,
to
I've
be
seen it on
anaerobic.
TV.
So
Yeah.
anyway, did that because he had a grant, and well, I learned about grants then because his grant money started to run out. So another friend, I'm not sure how I found out about that, was working at a microbiology. I think it was called Abbott Laboratories, and I think they're sort of in the news right now for some of this stuff. But they were testing soils and whatnot. But they had where they tested division that where they tested foods. And so I did that as well. And then I playing volleyball. I played doubles volleyball with a guy, lo and behold. They had some really good volleyball in Omaha. And most of them played sixes in the sand. And then it at one point just turned into those twos. But we would play. He was short, but he was good. But he was my boyfriend, and then he was going to school at the University of Nebraska, Omaha, getting his graduate degree. And he says, why don't you just start school here? They don't care. They want your money. You can take the GRE and get in later. Just start taking the classes. They'll take your money. So I did that and thought, guys, well, listen,
That's a way to get into grad school.
I thought I need to know something more about specifics. And I didn't. I just started taking molecular and cellular because that's what he was. And Kathy, I really, really liked it. I was so good at it. I just doing experiments wise.
Wow.
I just was right up my alley. It took coordination. It took precision. It took detail. All the things that I have an attention to detail like a lot of people don't have. And so all of these traits fell into this. And I had a crazy instructor in trying to finish, or advisor, I should say, trying to finish was that was another issue. But and then I broke up with the boyfriend, but I stuck with it. And all I knew is I got to finish this, and I got to get home, and meaning coming back to Colorado because my parents were moving back, and my sister, my brother, my other one was still over, and he met a lady from France. So they're divorced, but he's still over in France. But so he was gone, but the rest of my family was back in Colorado, and Colorado is Colorado. So, and that was,
Yep.
And that was
where
my
I
goal,
to be.
Get back here.
Where
and
I am.
So I did. I finished, and I ended up getting a job at National Jewish in a lab, and they studied this E1A adenovirus, which is a cold virus. A part of that gene there, they took a part of that is a tumor suppressor, they found out. So we were doing, can you suppress tumors in mice and whatnot? So we were doing some of that research. Well, that lasted about 3 years, and that guy there had some issues with who was at National Jewish and money, also getting money. And even though they said you don't have the big grants, they said, oh, well, you need this money. So he gets this money, but they say, well, no, that's not good enough. You need to get the big money from it's called an R01 grant from the NIH, National Institute of Health. So he decides, well, I'm just going to leave here because, this is the politics, I'm getting out. So he goes to Chicago, but he ends up getting the R01, and he could have stayed, but he didn't. It was just the principle of it. And he asked me, he says, will you come to Chicago with me? And I said, I can't do that. I don't want to leave my family now that I've gotten back here. And also, I said, I will set up your lab though. So I went out there with him, stayed with him and his wife and his, his boys were in college, I think, and their dogs that they had, but stayed with them and set up his whole lab for him there. But I met people at National Jewish and said, oh, well, this guy's looking to hire, somebody in his lab. So, and that was with the pulmonary hypertension. I'm like, what the heck is pulmonary hypertension? I don't know. I don't know anything about lungs either. So it didn't matter. It's just because, you're in research and a certain amount of cell and molecular stuff that you can do pertains to a lot of it. So that's how I got into this. His name's Dunbar Ivy, but he's chief of cardiology at Children's Hospital now. So that's how I got to be, and that was in 1999. And I've been in that lab since then, and we've morphed because he became chief. He had to hire some other people. There's my business partners. Technically, he is the boss, but we run the lab together because his name is on everything. He's the big writer in it. And so I've been fortunate. I don't like the writing part of it. I do it. I write protocols, experimental protocols for the lab. And I know how to do everything there is. I know if you can or can't do it. I know how to do so I know the gamut, but I have to write animal protocols, which is a different kind of protocol where you cover every single aspect of like the treatment of the animal, what you're going to do with the animal, all the procedures, and human protocols where if you're going to get someone's blood, you have to write just pages thick of every single little detail to that. So I don't like that part of it, but it comes with the job. And, my business partner, he writes most of the grant. I mean, we go over it together, and I do the, financial part of it. What's a budget and what is, methods and what, how many animals, all that part of it is all that detail. But he does the pizzazz and he was a creative writing major. Actually, he started out that way. So,
yeah. So he's almost more the sales,
yes.
if you would look at it from that, the sales and marketing,
yes.
whereas you're more
doing
CEO and operations, would you say? The grunt work, the lab. So how much time do you spend like in the lab versus, doing the writing, the protocol?
Well, right now it's mostly writing stuff because I'm essential personnel. So I go down there and do what I can, but it is quite a bit of time doing that writing and just keeping, from health and safety inspection to all of that maintenance of having a lab. So and we have hired people to do the fun part, but I have it down where if you do, I've done these experiments inside and out, and I've done everything wrong with them. So if you do it this way, you will be successful. So I probably have maybe 30% of the time, 25%. I would like to do more, but it's just not realistic when you're actually running the lab. It's difficult. The manager part of it is I want to do it. I don't want to be the coach or the manager of the team. I want to be the team, It's very difficult.
Yeah. So how big is your team?
It's pretty
or how
small,
many people
but right
do you
now
have
we
in your
have
lab?
6 people. So it fluctuates, anywhere from postdocs to we have had undergrads to masters to PhDs, postdocs, hiring what's called a professional research assistant. We, person who, so I guess we just hired another person. So it's about 7, but she is so like, we'll hire her on 25%. We'll pay for her 25%. She is an expert in physiology. So she knows how to do echoes and hemodynamics on mice and rats, which is incredible. Like for her and her knowledge. So we stole her from National Jewish. And so she's come over. Another group, so we'll have partial people too. So another group's paying her 75% time and we get her 25% time. But but we need someone who's an expert.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's not realistic because I can learn and know how to do anything, but it's not realistic for me to now learn how to do an echocardiogram on a mouse, that's going to take quite some time and some ability. So
Yeah.
I think I can do anything, but I don't know. That's getting a little bit on the cusp of.
No. Well, Kelley, this has been fascinating on two levels. One, to just understand more about research and biology and all of that. So thank you for sharing that piece. But I also just love how reflective you've been and how vulnerable and open you've been about kind of these, the events in your life that influenced you. I think that's really going to be helpful to people just starting out or in transition and stuck, because it's easy when you see someone from the outside and think, oh, they got it all figured out, they knew what they were doing, and their life is just great. And sometimes you start to understand the story and recognize we're all human and we all have stuff, and it's what we do with that stuff and how we learn and grow. And I certainly have seen and
You're
heard
welcome.
a lot about how
My
you've
pleasure.
learned and grown over the years, so thank you.
If I can help just one person, it's no shirt off my back anymore. It's just talking and telling experiences, and I don't care about being judged anymore. If you want to, it just doesn't matter to me. It's what I think of myself. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and these things happen,
yep.
but they aren't you. They just happened. Yeah. Well, any last words of wisdom that you would like to share with our listeners?
You need to go through as many experiences as you can, and you find out more about yourself when you do that, when you put yourself out there. And that doesn't mean just willy-nilly go and do something. That means you prepare, you decide what it is, and you prepare for it, and be able to do whatever it is best you can, your best effort. But also I've learned that I am my best friend. I am the one who I talk to the most, and I am, I need to be confident. And this is just older age now, is I am so comfortable in my own skin, whether, I'm 10 or 20 pounds overweight or whatever I am, or a little out of shape. Because when you get older, it really hits you kind of in a different way. But for young people, you can't just tell them, be confident in yourself and be, it doesn't work that way. I think it's experiences and what you take away, and just pay attention to what's going on around you, and really like yourself for who you are. Whether it's a quirk that is, if you don't like it, work on it, change it. Everyone can change. So I think that's the basic takeaway from my life, is I really like my life. I live with my dad, who can get very grumpy, and he's 85. And we lost my mom I took care of my mom. She had Alzheimer's. She died in her own bed. And it was not easy at that time. But for me, I feel so good about how she was taken care of till the last, minutes of her life. And I told my dad I would do the same for him. And it's a grind at times, but I very much, for me, I feel comfort with myself that I did that, and I'm able to do it. Yes.
They brought you into the world, and you helped them transition out of this world. Yeah. Wow. Well, so well said, your last words there, about, love yourself, but also put yourself out there, because it's by going through experiences that you know yourself and you learn about yourself. So Kelley, thank you again. And listeners, if you enjoyed today's podcast, please subscribe below, and then you'll be alerted for other interviews as they're posted. If you have any questions for Kelley or for me, you can post them on my website, lifestorycurator.com. And I'll make sure to get the questions to Kelley and get the answers back to you as the listener. And if you have questions about future interviews too, I'll get those answers. But on that note, Kelley, you keep doing the great work that you're doing, and stay safe.
Thank you, Kathy.
And all of you out there, stay safe. Thank you.